Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Shed That Shit. I am Alyx Coble-Frakes, one of your co-hosts and founder of the Agenda Period, with the lovely Aljolynn of Ladybox. And if you want to talk about some of that official transition, I think we can get into that during this call. But we were just chatting offline, and we're going to talk about cervical fluid today, but we're also going to talk about whatever the fuck we want to, because it's our podcast. So
yeah.
hey. So welcome to the ride. Aljolynn, how are you doing today?
I am good, and I'm in a bit of a fog. So that's how I'm doing. And then in terms of like my cycle, I don't know. I had some symptoms last week that used to happen when I was not on the IUD. And they would happen right before I would get my period. So I'm guessing like if I didn't have an IUD, I would maybe be having a period this week because of how I was last week. So
makes sense. Thank you for checking in there.
yeah.
I am checking in, about to get my period at any moment. In fact, who knows? It could happen when we're on this podcast.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So let's jump back. So that's where I'm checking in. Welcome back to this Shed That Shit podcast. And let's jump back to what you were talking about. I think we were going somewhere interesting.
Yeah. So I was going to ask Alyx about her wonderful coaching services for myself, and then also for like my gal pals. A lot of my friends are cis female, so that's why I'm saying gal pals. But one friend in particular called me yesterday right before she was getting an IUD inserted and a NuvaRing. She produces low estrogen, and she was having an anxiety attack over it. And so I stayed on the phone with her to like have her talk through, what she was feeling anxious over. And then we talked about what she can control. And what you can control in that moment is, whether or not you will do it. And then if you do it, then you can control whether or not you get it taken out. And then you can also track how you feel once it's inserted. So anyway, it didn't go well for her yesterday. They ended up inserting it, and then she left it in for about an hour and a half, and then they took it back out. They did insert the NuvaRing. But anyway, I was bringing that up because I was like, some of these friends of mine would benefit from having some kind of coaching, because I am knowledgeable about our hormone cycles. I am not as well versed as some other folks out there like Alyx. I'm more focused on like the mental health and like self-love aspect of our cycles and our bodies. But Alyx is very knowledgeable about our hormones and like more of the anatomy, physiology of it all than I am. So that's like why I was bringing that up.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I was talking to someone about it this morning, actually on a different call. We were talking about entrepreneurship and mom and parenting and just like life and all the shit we've brought up on this podcast before. And I've actually had an interesting conversation with an author who writes a lot about this space, but part of the problem that still happens, even for me sometimes, because we're swimming in the water of the patriarchy and white supremacy. So we're all wet. We are all internalizing this shit all the time.
Yeah.
And so what is really interesting is that, and I've heard this from hundreds of clients and users of the Agenda Period, is like during the first half of our, after our period, all the way through ovulation, our hormone programming is most similarly aligned with how men's bodies work, AKA the whole way our entire world is set up, AKA the way we see default and correct human behavior and productivity based on particularly cisgender male bodies. And so what happens, and I hear this all the time, is like, I feel really great right now. My business is great right now. Parenting is easy. And then there's this switch after ovulation because our hormones do something super different that is no way parallel to what's going on in the first half of the cycle. And I hear over and over again, I'm not productive. something's wrong with me. I don't feel good in my body. I don't feel good at work. I feel guilty because shit's not easy right now. And really, it's just we're not knowing and appreciating and understanding how to work with ourselves. Like there's no playbook for how to live in that half of the cycle. And so we automatically think there's something wrong with us because the world repeatedly tells us there's something wrong with us. You're hormonal, you're crazy, you're this, you're that, right?
You're
and even
hysterical.
you're hysterical. Yeah, all that bullshit. And so like it catches us off guard, not because there's anything bad or wrong with us, but because we've been trained to believe that there is, particularly during that time. And so coaching, I work on like expanding out whenever someone brings this like really heated moment to me in a coaching session, they're almost always in the luteal phase. Like I wish I had data on my clients, but it's like 9 times out of 10, the person having this reaction, the reaction is valid, but the way they're feeling like that is because like they don't understand how to work with themselves and care for themselves, because we're just missing this entire playbook. And it even happened to me a few days ago. I was just like, what's wrong with me? I know my cycle is pretty well. I was like, what's wrong with me? I feel like crying. Like, I feel like crying at everything at the drop of a hat. What's going on with me? What's wrong with me right now? Why am I having these reactions? My period, which is when I typically experience more of these feelings, is like a few days before my period. I was like, it's like 10 days away. What's wrong with me? I pulled up my Agenda Period app. My period is supposed to happen in 2 days from when this happened. And I was like, oh, I've been so fucking busy. I've completely ignored myself and then felt guilty for feeling like I was going to be too emotional. And as soon as I just had that awareness, I was like, oh, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with me. These are my typical feelings and emotions. I'm highly attuned and sensitive during this time. That's why I'm feeling all of this really big and bold. So I just need some space to go cry, and it's fine. And the guilt, shame melted away. But it was just because I was lacking that awareness in that moment. And I'm someone who pays attention to this all the time. So if this is not in your every waking moment awareness, I feel like it's even harder to access that kind of forgiveness for yourself.
Oh, that's 100% true. When you don't have the tools to flow the way that you need to flow, or you desire to flow, of course you're kind of just like splashing about, like, what the fuck is happening? What do I do? And then, once you're able to just like tread, like calm down and just like tread, and then just like look around you. And so like looking around you is like looking in your agenda app, or like, whatever you're doing to track, is just like, oh, this is what's happening. Okay. And then whatever you can do to like either keep treading or get yourself to float, or just get the fuck out of the water. I don't know. But yeah, it's just being able to take that moment.
This is not to blame and shame anyone who does not have access to this information, because it's all really intentional to keep us. I was even thinking, this is kind of going to maybe take it in a different direction, but I was even thinking about it this morning as I scrolled past one of those plastic-free period ads, kind of like badgering women and menstruators who choose to use disposable products.
Oh.
It was just like, like, come on, help save the planet, use a reusable pad, use a cup, use a disc. And I'm someone who uses a cup. I love it. It's not accessible to everyone. It's not available to everyone. It's not financially accessible to everyone. Even though in the long term, it saves you money, it can be a really high level investment. $50 is not accessible to many people. Even the ones that are to $25 to $30, not accessible to all people around the planet. And again, why are we not blaming Tampax for making products that are not accessible and are using bad materials? Why are we not blaming Always for dumping chemical waste in rivers? Why are we blaming the consumer and this like person at the bottom of the pile, and making them feel more shame and more guilt? And so I don't want this to become into that, right? Of like, know your phases and know where you're going. Because like the system really intentionally keeps us very exhausted. So we can't access this information. We can't ask for help because then we can't take our power back. It's all super insidious and complete bullshit. But that train was like going around in my head this morning. Just like,
yeah, that's just the thing, is like, we don't grow up with we haven't grown up with the information that we actually need to to be in flow, really. You know, like we just get told that, or at least I did, because I think I'm about 10 years older than you are. But like I like don't even remember what I learned in school. All I remember was like I was 8 years old. My parents sat me in front of a TV. They played this video about puberty. I didn't really understand what a period was. I'm just like, okay, it's a dot. I don't know. What's a fucking period? Nobody answered my question. They're just like, okay, did you get what you needed? Okay. I'm like, what do I need? I'm 8 years old. What am I supposed to get out of this video? All I learned was that like before that video, I learned that wieners are not vaginas. Wieners were like another name for penises. That's all I got out of it. I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know that like a vagina is a vagina and it's not a wiener.
A plus. Yeah, it was pretty similar for me. Like I got the class in 6th grade, not when I was 8. My parents never showed me a puberty video. It might have been helpful. It may not have been helpful. And I got my period before the video and then felt really, I already knew by that point that it was bad and wrong. Because when like we're talking about it in the class, the teacher, I think she might have asked if anyone got their period yet, which is like not a good move as a teacher to like try to out your students. I was like, no, and I was like, yeah, no, God, but like then like every time having my period, like being, you know, in the solid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, yep.
Like try not to move or breathe or make a sound of crinkly plastic. Oh yeah, it was terrible. It was really terrible.
Yeah, they don't like tell you. They don't tell you. They don't talk to you about what even like your pelvic area is going to smell like. You know, what does a healthy vagina smell like? What does a, you know, vagina that has a yeast infection? Like even talk to us about the smells, because I mean, like I grew up thinking that my vulva was ugly because you grow up, well, like you get exposed to a white female's vulva, which looks like white and pink. And so like I'm looking at mine, I'm like, well, mine doesn't like look like that. It must be deformed and really ugly. And then I don't learn until like I have one male partner and he's just like, no, it's beautiful. What are you talking about? And then he actually showed me what different vulvas look like. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then you like learn from another, like I learned from another male partner, like, oh yeah, your vagina smells like totally normal. I'm like, okay, great. Like, but nobody talks about, anyway, like if the reason of like, you know, connecting with Alyx and asking her about her coaching is just because like we lack the information that we need and we lack the support that we need to help us feel like we have agency over our own bodies. And it really sucks. And then I mean, I love being there and being supportive for my friends. Also, wouldn't it be nice if we felt more empowered about like the decisions that we're going to make, and you know, not feel like we were jumping through hoops before we make a decision?
Yeah, and like could have all the information in one place to us and like not have to go. And it's again, I am the white supremacy record today. It is like so much of colonization, white supremacy, like folks used to gather communally. People would get information passed from their moms and their grandmas and their aunts in a way that was not full of shame. Particularly people native and indigenous to the United States, to the islands of Hawaii. We had a really awesome guest on last season talking about that. And then very systematically and intentionally stripping away the ability to have safe and sacred space. And so like in a way, those folks used to serve as the guidebook for your period, pregnancy, ways to stop pregnancy if you didn't want to be pregnant naturally. These things happened. Breastfeeding support if you were unable to easily latch a baby. You had this whole collective of women and menstruators and cyclical people around you that could support you understanding these things. And it's been completely destroyed in the favor of capitalism and in the favor of exploiting people's bodies and labor for the benefit of a very few people. And so it's just fucking sad and bullshit. And so how can we then create spaces and create collaborative opportunities now to reclaim what was taken, and what people who look like me have benefited from for a long time, right? Like, how can we now do something different that is not full of shame, and it welcomes back this natural bodily awareness and understanding? Because if we don't do that, the planet is in sincere trouble of completely collapsing. So,
and really the answer is to just keep asking questions, keep reaching out, keep connecting. And yeah, sure, some of you may feel shame, but don't feel shame. You know, you're curious about what's going on with your body, and you should be you have a right to know what's going on with your body.
Yeah, so that's going to lead us to what we originally thought we were going to talk about today, which is cervical fluid and the different kinds of moistures or lack of moistures that you may experience. Because a few weeks ago now, I had like a really intense day of cervical fluid. It was like the stretch.
Beautiful. It was beautiful. I thought it was beautiful.
It was really cool. And so I just like took a tiny screen grab of it and like a 5-second video, put it on TikTok and Instagram, as well as some stills, so that people could see what it looked like, because I used to have that kind of cervical fluid. And this was before I even had sex for the first time. And I thought, I was like always worried. I'm like, do I have an STD? Like, what the fuck is this? I don't know what's going on. Like, because it looked like clumpy or stringy. And I was just like, this is not normal, even though it's totally normal. But no one ever told me it was normal. It was nothing we ever talked about in school. So I thought it was really weird, even though it's just awesome. But it got taken after on TikTok. It got hit by a whole bunch of like 14-year-old trolls. Most of them were like 14, 15, 16-year-olds were like, I don't need to know about this. This is gross. I'm going to throw up. Just like on and on and on. It got removed for violating community guidelines and being seen as violent and harassing material on both platforms.
What? I didn't know it was flagged for violent and harassing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But Instagram didn't take down the pictures. It just took down the video, which also doesn't really make sense. I think they might have thought it was sperm, but it was not sperm. Like that I was just like playing with a shot of jizz on my like reel or something.
Oh my God.
But like the comment after comment after comment on TikTok of like, this is disgusting. Bodies shouldn't do this. I want to throw up in my mouth. I'm a guy. I'm never going to need to know this. As a man, I don't need to know what this is. And I responded back. To all of those. I'm like, if you are in fact a man who identifies as homosexual, this is probably nothing you're going to need to deal with. And they were just like, but if you're ever interested in having sex with a woman or a menstruating person, you're going to probably need to know what this is and know that it's normal. But then there were even some girls in the comments who I could just feel the shame from them. Like, you don't need to show this, or like, blah, 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 blah. Or no one needs to know what this is. Mama, yes, you do need to know what this is if you want to know what's going on in your body. So I was not surprised, but I was a little shocked that it was coming from such young posters, because we always talk about like Gen Z will save us.
Once they get over their like adolescence, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully. But it was a little bit of a wild ride. And I was like, y'all are proving the point.
Yeah.
Of like why we need to see these things, why we need to normalize these conversations. What is missing right now from the conversation? Because I had no idea it was normal when I was that age.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have. But you know, like even when you posted it, I was like, damn, what's she what's she posting? Like I was very curious, and then I was just like, damn, that's like really empowering. And then you did a whole video, and then I was like, wait, is this real? I wish like people could still see it, Alex, because it was long, and yeah, it was a long one. It was long.
That's what we would call peak cervical fluid. Yeah. Very like spindly in the way that a spider's web is to trap the ideal sperm and save them for the egg release. So.
But yeah, I was so happy to see it because I was like, yes, normalizing this. And then it was sad to have it taken down for sure.
DM me if someone needs to see the video. I still have the video. It's just not not with the music and the title, but yeah. And I was taking screenshots because after a certain point, I was like, oh, this is gonna get taken down. This is gonna get taken down. I know. I just knew. I was like, after
Yeah.
even all, because it got like I think close to 2,000 views on TikTok, but then which is like the most I've ever gotten on which is not that much, but it's the most I've ever. But like after all the trolls, I was like, this is going to get taken down and nothing is going to happen to the trolls. This is only going to this content will be targeted. While I see skits of blood and heads rolling and like all those toxic ass bro podcasts talking about like woman, if she doesn't bounce back right after pregnancy, like I'm going to divorce her ass. Like all this shit is allowed to be on. It does not violate any community guidelines, but something that is normal. Just like, of course. So let's talk about the 4 phases and what kind of flow is normal or what you've experienced for yourself. And we can maybe each kind of talk about our own experiences with all of the 4 phases. So phase number 1 is menstruation. So we count menstrual flow, that kind of fluid on the first day that you actually have flow. So what would be like movement, not spotting. If any of that kind of brown spotting might be left over from the previous cycle, or can sometimes indicate some hormonal areas of opportunity if it happens for several days before your flow starts, but we could get into that in a different episode. And typically it should be around like a cranberry-ish color, and not too many big clots. If there are really big clots, that could be something to get checked out. It could be indicative of a fibroid. And yeah, but if depending on your product method that you use, it could be that could actually cause some clumping. So it really kind of just depends. But and then the flow will typically last from 3 days up into 7 days, really kind of depending on your body. So anything in particular that sparks for you about the first kind of fluid?
I mean, you'll definitely, again, it's not when you're spotting because you could have some of that in your luteal phase, but it's definitely just like, oh, you are here. I used to use pads, and so it was just like, oh, there is like that strip of blood on my pad, and here you are, period. Okay. So that is for sure the and then like what are some other ones like cravings, but usually like I do crave more iron based food, so like I'm loving spinach, I'm loving red meat, and usually I don't eat a lot of red meat, so
Same.
yeah.
I was like really craving red meat yesterday, so I made spaghetti, and I'm like, I maybe eat red meat 2 or 3 times a month, and it's like around my period. It's just like, oh, I know my period is coming. Oh, here's one I want to kind of debunk about this fluid, and this is something I didn't actually really cognitively understand until I started using a cup, but I always thought that period blood smelled really terrible. There's a lot of the way we talk about like women being smelly and just in any part, like any kind of smell that's not a flower, which PS your body should not smell like flowers, but you know, it's all that bullshit marketing. And then I started using a menstrual cup, and the first time I dumped it out, I was like, I don't smell anything. Like what? I like smelled my blood. I was like, what is going on? And I like could not smell anything. I was like, why did I always think that period blood smelled terrible? Then I was thinking about like the kind of stuff that was on pads mixed with your sweat, the chemicals that can be found in tampons. And I'm like, oh, here's another gigantic ass lie. It's not our bodies at all. It's all this other shit that we shouldn't be putting on or in them that is creating a maybe displeasing to my nose odor, mixed with the shame and embarrassment that someone, God forbid, know I'm on my period.
That's a good call. That's a really good call. I remember the TikTok, I think it's a TikTok video of like a woman, she's supposed to be on her period, and she like does a handstand and her partner catches like her legs, and he like pretends to smell something, but like I think the video is like calling out like he can't smell shit, like he can't smell anything. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's no
The
real.
more bullshit. Oh, and the other thing is it's not just blood that you're losing. You're also losing cells and tissue, endometrium tissue that gets sloughed off during the process. So a lot of the material is not just the actual blood. It's colored with the blood because you're losing that, but it's also all of these other components as well that is getting shed in the process. So that is menstrual, the kind of fluid you can expect during menstruation.
Sorry, I just had like a visual moment of like all the things coming out of like the uterus and through, anyway, like through the vagina, and I'm like, material girl, like just like visualizing material girl.
I think you should make that TikTok. TikTok is the best and worst thing it's ruined my life. And now I just think in like these song loops all the time of these little like.
That's like, as soon as you said like all this material, and I'm like, material girl.
Cool. So then the follicular phase, typically it'll be maybe a little bit of a sticky discharge, if anything, a little bit creamy if you notice after you wipe, after you go to the bathroom, but there's typically not as much going on during this part of the cycle. Anything in particular that kind of stands out to you?
In terms of like discharge or fluids, no, I can't think of anything else. I think ovulation is kind of like the more fun part.
Oh yeah, me too. It's really like kind of more like the chill one, and what people may even say is the normal one. But remember, all of these phases are normal. Our bodies go through all of these different processes and they're totally normal. And the thing we'll say is if it goes really beyond one of these, like if it starts to be a really yellow or green discharge or really chunky or itchy, those are the things that are not normal during your cycle. And that is a great indication to you to get some medical support. If you had a yeast infection before, you know what that feels like. Maybe go get some Monistat or a product that you can use for that. But if it's kind of outside of these ranges, that would be a great indication that you need some support. So just putting that out there too. Next is the ovulation phase. So this is not just the day that your egg is released. Actually, this fluid tends to be before the egg is released, because when this fluid is really popping, sperm can live and survive in it for 5 days. So that was some of the peak cervical mucus that if you saw the video that I was demonstrating.
It's beautiful. They're beautiful. Sperm would definitely be there.
Yeah, they would. They're like, get cozy into this, like, so, but like, that's a great indication for you if you are using the fertility awareness method, is like, if you do not want to be pregnant, do not have sex when you're having that kind of fluid without a barrier method. Yeah, so it can last up, anywhere for 3 to 5 days. If you're extra hydrated, it can cause it to be really stretchy, which is probably why mine is like that, because I drink water all of the time. So that's a good tip. But yeah, it's a really may feel silky or smooth in between your fingers, and then tends to have the elasticity. And again, it's just a way to keep sperm alive in the typically pretty acidic vaginal environment. So the sperm can live in there, hang out, and wait for the egg to pop out.
There can
it's pretty fun.
Spotting during ovulation. And so depending on some other symptoms that you're experiencing, it can be normal, but it is something good to note and track just in case something else comes up. Yeah,
Definitely. Always tracking that. So yeah, I think that one is kind of fun, but it's definitely the one that I thought was weird. I thought, oh my God, something's wrong with me when I had it when I was younger, but it's totally normal. Anything else we should say about that kind of fluid, or any experiences you've had with it?
Not so much fluid, but I thought it was interesting that you did a video, I think a week or so ago, about the discomfort or like cramping that can happen during ovulation, which I was like, oh yeah, I used to get that. So are you open to talking about that really quick, and then we can go to luteal?
Yeah, so that's typically like, it's called middle schmerz. I don't speak German, but it means mid pain. They're like the first people that coined the term, because it's typically midway point through your cycle, but not always. Really depends on how long your cycle is. But it can be pretty uncomfortable. And I found it is more uncomfortable postpartum than I remember before. But I started taking my Semaine supplement right around ovulation to reduce that inflammation, because it's that area is like really something is popping out of like the follicles are maturing, and then one of the ovum actually pops out, like bursts through, and that can lead to some pain and discomfort in that area of the body, and really tends to be localized to either the right or left side. I have it almost always on the right side, so I wonder if I ovulate more on the right side. Or I also had appendicitis, so I also kind of wonder if I have scar tissue in that area. And so like it's extra painful when I ovulate on that side. If it's really, really, really intensely painful that doesn't get dulled at all by aspirin or something like Semaine, that would be an indication to potentially go get something checked out, because it could be indicative of a fibroid or a uterine or an ovarian cyst, like more problematic than just the fact that the egg is coming out. So something to definitely look out for there as well.
Yeah, mine was on the right side too. And it did happen after I had my son. So before I was like, man, before I have periods.
I had it a few times, but nothing like now. It's like, it's much more intense now, and it can be uncomfortable. It can be pretty uncomfortable. And then during the luteal phase, it tends to go down to more kind of like sticky and dry, whereas before ovulation was sticky and creamy, now more kind of like the sticky and dry part. And it should be kind of chillaxing until you come up to your next period.
Spotting.
Yeah, you might have a little bit of spotting. Here's something that I noticed that I thought it was kind of weird. Sometimes right before I get my period, and I only started realizing it once I started tracking, I would get a couple of days that was like almost like the cervical mucus around ovulation, but much less slippery. And what that is a mucus plug that gets shed before your period happens.
Oh, fascinating.
Because what happens after ovulation, progesterone kind of like plugs it up in there. Because of a potential pregnancy, it doesn't want any other bacteria going up into your cervix. In case you are going to be baking a human in your uterus. But then it can shed to allow the endometrium to release on your period. And so it may not be a lot, and you may not notice it, but it's something I have noticed a couple of times, and it can be a little bit almost like rubber cement viscosity. And so that just allows the flow to relieve itself from your body. But yeah, that's another one that I've a few times in the past was like, oh my God, that's so weird. What's going on? And I was just like, I learned about all the things. And I was like, oh, hello, little plug. My period must be coming soon. This is probably a good sign that I will likely not be pregnant.
Yes. Well, that was like a helpful walkthrough of our sexual and reproductive health and the different discharge fluids that come out.
So again, remember, these are a good baseline. This is something to get curious about. You may notice you have a lot of cervical fluid. You may notice you're kind of wet all the time, and that's fine, right? It's just totally about learning your body, learning what you need. And these things will change as we age, postpartum, all of the different life cycles that we go through. So that's why tracking is super duper important, because you get to understand what are the healthy shifts versus like something doesn't feel right here and I need to get some additional outside support. So understanding what your baseline is really helps you become the best health advocate for yourself that's possible. So if we wanted to just kind of end it on one thought, Aljolynn, what's something you wish people would know about their fluid?
I would actually encourage you, like, even if it's in the shower, but really the shower is not the best place, but to like stick your finger up your vag every once in a while, just to like get a sense of like what's going on. What do your fingers look like when they come out? Even like smell it smell your fingers and see like, okay, this is a different smell. And if you're, cycle tracking, then like note that too, as you're tracking. It's going to be really helpful. And we're big proponents of body literacy. So I know it sounds weird to like hear someone say, stick your fingers up your vagina, but I'll do it. Like maybe I'm changing and I'm just like, okay, I just want to like check and see how things are. And it's just, that's helpful just to get to know yourself a little bit better.
And like, it's your vagina.
Mhm.
And there's still so much around female masturbation and pleasure and touching, and like that it's almost like this no-go zone unless it's someone else doing the investigative work. And that's
100%.
so something we need to like shed as well, because it's total bullshit. But I love that you bring up the smells. I noticed like when my pH is super healthy after my period, I feel like my pee almost smells like soup, like a soup base.
Yeah.
Like kind of, but it's like an indicator to me that everything's like going really well. And so if that smell changes, I'm like, oh, like what's going on? Maybe I need to drink some more water, what's normal versus what's not normal for me. But it is your body. You can touch it. You can investigate it. You can see what all of these, and there's nothing wrong with doing any of that. So
think of it as like a self breast exam. If you have breasts, it's the same thing. You're just checking to make sure that one, you understand what your own baseline is, and then two, just like making sure things are okay, because you won't know what really your vulva, your vagina, what they feel like until you touch them, if you're comfortable enough to do so.
Well, thank you for a great episode today, Aljolynn. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, likewise. Was that what's your like takeaway? What's your one thought?
Oh, yeah, I love like to check out the feelings of it. And I love that the thing that really stood out to me is like you found really supportive partners. And so if you are engaging in sexual activities with people who are not responding to you the way that Aljolynn was describing, find a new partner. My sexual health teacher, it was gender and sexuality teacher, she said, partners are like buses. A new one comes around every 15 minutes. And so if someone is treating you in a way that is not acceptable and is not empowering to you, honey, find another one. It's going to be one passing on by. So I just love that. Find reaffirming spaces. If you do not feel affirmed in the space that you are in, find a new space. I think that's really important as we're discovering ourselves.
Yay. Thanks, lady. Thanks, listeners. And then until next time, keep it real and messy, just like periods.